Good afternoon, everyone. NYSAC membership. I'm Stephen Acquario, Executive Director of the New York State Association of Counties, and I'm pleased to be joined today by David Lucas and Ryan Gregoire from the NYSAC staff, as well as Mark Levine and Tom Oldfather here in the studio. Very pleased that you were able to join us here this afternoon for a enacted budget review, final enacted budget review, but also a look into the actions of the federal government and how some of these recent reports could impact the state of New York and, more importantly, the counties of New York. But before we do that, I did want to bring up a recent partnership that we have put together. This is, of course, the Amazon Business Prime Partnership, and we're getting a lot of calls about this, and we just want to remind the county members, this is for all things county. So your water, soil conservation districts, your independent elected officials, county clerks, the county district attorneys, the community college, your entire court system, state Supreme Court chambers, county court, family court, surrogate, all the court system is eligible for this free Amazon Business Prime account. Community colleges, again, any agency that you're working through, even your not-for-profits that you're funding through county dollars are eligible for this as well. There's a team of account executives that works exclusively with the counties. Your procurement team can work with the account representative to set up the controls that meet your respective procurement policies. This offers government discounts, sales tax exemptions, of course, free shipping, and also pay by invoice. If you have any questions on this $1,300 value, please send a note to amazoninfo@nysac.org, amazoninfo@nysac.org. And I want to thank Amazon for bringing this to our attention. So let's get underway here. First order of business is, of course, to thank Ryan Gregoire for his excellent leadership here in shepherding the state budget process through, Ryan, a very difficult budget process. We went over a little bit this year. We went over 5 or 6 weeks later than an April 1st deadline. Any observations on the process?
Well, 13 extenders this year, Stephen, is the longest time frame for the state of New York to enact a fiscal year budget since the Pataki years. So it's been a long time since we've seen a budget take this long to be enacted. But here we are. We do have a financial plan, a budget in place now, and our county officials and the school districts can start expecting to see some aid flowing to them.
Yeah, of course, if we got into the summer months, it would have jeopardized school districts and the funding for schools. I do want to say thank you very much, Ryan, for your excellent leadership in that regard and keeping us on point. And the way that budget dropped, I don't know if the lawmakers themselves had a real opportunity to understand what was in fact in these bills.
Well, that's a great observation as well. One nuance this year is the fact that all of the budgets were released on, I believe it was on a Monday evening, and the budget bills were just advanced to the floor almost immediately. So there really wasn't time to digest thousands of pages of text,
Very, very small font as well. Anyways, thank you very much, Ryan, and also to David Lucas for his ongoing budget expertise over the years. Just an invaluable team, grateful. And I want all of our members to know how hard our staff works for you. The amount of issues that we address, Ryan, I don't think there's an association in Albany that does as many issues as we have to deal with. Name an issue, the counties are involved in it.
The state budget has 10 budget bills. That's what create the budget. And most other groups do not have to read all 10 budget bills. Of course, NYSAC, we do, because to your point, Stephen, we participate in all facets of state government.
I mean, for instance, school districts only care about the education bill.
The education, that's right.
Okay, let's get underway here, and we'll go through what we have learned from this budget, And I also want to send along the greetings of our president, the Honorable Benjamin Boykin from Westchester County, and the president of NYSAC, and also the Honorable Jason Garner, the president of the County Executives Association. Jason is on, and he'll say a few things towards the end of the presentation. If you have questions, I encourage you to send them in on a chat line, right, Ryan? There's a chat feature. Please send questions in at any point in time during this presentation. I do want to remind everybody that sales taxes are expiring and will be a #1 priority for this association and for our members, Ryan, to get those bills introduced and in fact passed. Have all the bills been introduced, and have they been passed yet?
Not quite yet. We're still waiting. There's one county left to get a bill introduced. The other counties all have their bills introduced. They have all advanced to the Senate calendar, which means they can go on what's called the active list as soon as today if they wanted to. In the Assembly, most of them are in Ways and Means, but that's typical for the New York State Assembly. We expect them to go on a calendar and move through the process.
Okay.
So the key for our members today is encourage your state delegation to move those bills. Get it through Ways and Means and Rules in the Assembly to the floor, and in the Senate, ask for it to be put on an active list.
What is the calendar for the legislative session? We've got the balance of May, and we have a couple of weeks into June 17th. Is that the new date?
Well, it could be the new date. It hasn't been officially declared yet. Right now, the last scheduled date is Thursday, June 12th, but it's likely that they'll do a Friday, Monday, Tuesday until June 17th.
So not many working session days left, maybe 3 weeks.
A little more than a dozen.
Little more than a dozen. Okay. Thank you, Ryan. So let's get into it here. If we could advance the next slide here. We want to start with Washington, D.C., and we want to start with the priorities of the president. We're showing here now, and we're doing this for a reason because there's a lot of activity. Dave, the president, started this with some priorities, which we'll go over in a minute. And what is the Congress doing right now after the president here has set these priorities?
Yeah, so the Congress had passed the budget resolution right before the Easter break. So after they came back from the Easter Passover break, they started working on the bill. So this week, today, the House is marking up bills in the committees of jurisdiction, and their goal is to get everything out of the House by Memorial Day. That'll probably flip. The Senate is shooting for 4th of July to get their bills out, but they're starting to mark up bills today, and by the end of the week, these should be out of committee today, and we'll see where we are at that point.
Okay, here's the presidential agenda: tax cuts, extending tax cuts, enacting new tax cuts, of course, spending in the Defense Department and border security, mass deportation. Obviously, this has been in the news, cutting mandatory and discretionary spending. And then we're showing some programs that have not been set for reductions. Impact in New York here, the key here that we're looking at is Medicaid. Medicaid. New York spends about 11% of the total federal Medicaid spending, and these numbers really matter a lot because the actions based on the Congressional Budget Office estimates about 14 million recipients could lose health coverage. As Dave mentioned, bills being drafted in the House this week, markups, changing Medicaid rules and regulations, changing all kinds of policies, reducing the Affordable Care Act, enhanced FMAP by 10% for expansion states, lots of changes coming in Medicaid. And we're looking at that very closely. Again, the impact in New York here, really focusing on Medicaid here, modifying rules about retroactive coverage, includes pharmacy benefit management reforms for Medicaid and Medicare, prohibits Medicaid funding to be used for family planning services, moratoriums, new healthcare provider taxes. Dave, why should New York counties care about healthcare provider taxes.
Yeah, that's a big one for New York. 49 states use healthcare provider taxes, but have been on the forefront of that in New York. We were like first into the game, behind a couple states from the Midwest back in the 1990s. But we raised about 5 to 6 billion annually in healthcare provider taxes. There are provisions in the House bill that would end the new MCO provider tax that was just enacted in the state budget. It was approved, I think, in September of last year. They are putting provisions in the law. If this does end up in the final bill, it would eliminate that program immediately. So that's $3.7 billion that was supposed to be spent over the next 3 years in the financial plan. So that's a big deal. So they're freezing in place under this proposal wherever you are on provider taxes as far as your rate goes. We've probably maxed out most of the rate allowable levels in New York, but there's probably still some room to grow there, but we won't be able to in the future. So that's a potential big impact.
One key highlight here for the members to be aware of on this prior slide is the impact of this last bullet, the reduction in the Affordable Care Act EFMAP by 10% that Stephen had just mentioned. If this ends up being part of this reconciliation package, we're looking at a little over $1 billion negative hit in federal revenue for the state of New York. How that's going to be accounted for is certainly an unknown, but that's a big cost driver that everyone should be aware of as DC proceeds here.
Absolutely, Ryan. Thank you. A bullet here, second to last bullet. I really want to circle this one, Dave. This is imposing work requirements for able-bodied adults ages 19 to 64 years of age, 80 hours per month. Can you unpack that a bit? How does this affect New York counties?
Yeah, this is a pretty big expansion. There are some work requirements like in SNAP and some other programs, and I think there's some small work requirements in the Medicaid program, but it's a very small targeted population. This would expand the pool of recipients that would have to be engaged in these activities, whether it's going to college, in a training program, working, part-time. It's a lot of administrative function, and a lot of this would probably be sent down to the counties to do. So instead of having to interview, 1 or 2% of your Medicaid population, you potentially have to interview, 50% of your Medicaid population and make sure they're satisfying these work requirements. And there'll be much more, a lot of paperwork requirements, expanding how many times during the year you have to check the status of these individuals to make sure they're employed, to make sure they're at the correct address. Some of these things will be monthly checkoffs, which now we're doing once a year. So it's a big workload. We've seen an estimate from the Department of Health that the administrative expense to do these work requirements could potentially be $270 million a year just on the administration of the program, not knowing how many people might end up losing coverage as a result. What's an interesting note here is the concept of work requirements in Medicaid has been out there for a while. A bill was introduced several years ago, and CBO scored it at about $100 billion in savings for the federal government over 10 years. This new proposal is being scored at $300 billion. It's a tripling of the federal savings. So we haven't had a time to pour through the CBO analysis on why it's up so much. Part of it could be because of COVID. There's a lot more people on the program that are working their way off the program right now. But the program didn't triple in size during COVID. So we should be concerned because when we're 11% of the spend and $300 billion is out the door, you could expect we could be losing $3 or $4 billion each year from this initiative.
Wow, Dave, that is a lot of money, $300 billion just in that one segment of Medicaid. Continuing with the federal discussion here, we're just reporting on Affordable Care Act. As Dave mentioned, some of these changes that the Congress is looking at right now. We are working on this very carefully, working with our delegation in Washington. We will continue to closely coordinate the county's position on this with the state of New York's position jointly with the office of the New York governor and the congressional delegation. A lot in the news lately, Dave, United States Senator Chuck Schumer doing a statewide tour yesterday about SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program here. Looks like there's some changes coming our way in this particular program. Do you want to add any commentary on SNAP?
Yeah, the big thing the federal government's looking for here is a contribution from the state to pay for a share of the program. Now, some of these,
Don't we pay for that now?
no, counties pay half of the administrative costs to run the program, and the federal government pays the other half. They want to increase that to a 75% state share, which in our case would fall on the counties. We don't have a fiscal on that. But in addition, they want states to contribute at a minimum 5% of all program costs. So in 2024, New York spent about $7.5 billion on SNAP benefits were provided in New York. So, and then that's the minimum, 5% would be the floor. It rises up to 25% of program costs if you have an error rate greater than 10%.
Do we know what New York's error rate is?
New York's error rate in 2024 was 14%. So we're above it. I would say about half the states are above the 10% threshold at this point. This would not go into effect until federal fiscal year 2028. So you really got to get your act in order. But if we were to pay 25%, that would be another $2 billion loss almost for the state of New York from these federal changes. So they're starting to pile up in these couple of bills.
We're over $5 billion now in potential negative impact.
Yep. If anyone's keeping tally, we're over 5 billion in negative impacts in New York State alone, just in the Medicaid and SNAP program areas that we're highlighting here today. Again, another chart here going on more and more about SNAP. Dave mentioned a lot of these issues here. Changes the definition of an able-bodied adult without dependents to include individuals up to the age of 64. That age is currently set at 54 today, and individuals with children age 7 or greater or older. It requires counties to have unemployment rates above 10% to be eligible for work requirement waivers, and allowing those waivers to be valid for 12 months. A lot of changes coming our way, it looks like, in SNAP. Again, no proposed changes, Dave and Ryan, in TANF or the social services block grant that we've seen so far.
Yeah, we haven't seen any yet.
Okay. We wanted to set the table because a lot of work is happening right now in Washington, D.C. If I were you listening to this, I would send a note to your congressional member and ask them to be cognizant of the local government impact. The county impact of their decisions is much different in New York than it might be in Texas. It's much different in New York than it might be in Florida or even California or all of the states, Dave. So very important for you to let your member of Congress know that those actions really have a direct impact to county governments. So we have a state budget, $260 billion. We'll shift our attention to that now. $260 billion, about $24 billion more. Dave, how is that possible to be spending $24 billion more than last year? How is that possible?
Yeah, it's a huge increase. And
where did the money come from?
Well, you know, the state receipts have been coming in a lot higher than anticipated over the last few years. You know, during COVID, there was a lot of extra ARPA money. The COVID money came in. A lot of that money kind of fell to the bottom line for the state and for a lot of counties, because it basically reimbursed counties for expenses that were normal expenses, but then it backfilled and it ended up in our reserves. So the state had a lot of extra reserves. They had a lot of extra one-time money from the federal government during COVID, and they set programs moving forward. They did some expansions, and they really haven't pulled back on any of the expansion. So there's a continuing to pay for this. They haven't pulled from the reserves until this year,
right,
which is part of their budget. So they've been managing to do it with reserves or with finances that are coming in through income tax and through other mechanisms. And for the first time in this budget, there is a $7 billion expense that's going to come out of fiscal reserves to pay for the unemployment insurance, the federal debt by New York businesses, which a lot of people have been asking for. Other states have done this as well, but the other states use their ARPA money to do it. So this is coming out of state general fund basically for this large expenditure, but that's part of the reason we have this 24 billion in extra spending. There's some really big expenditures.
Okay, and as we're projecting here that the federal funding is dropped by 6 billion in this enacted budget. Ryan, that doesn't include the additional 6 billion that you mentioned a few minutes ago.
Right, yeah, this is the state just projecting a temporary decrease in federal aid prior to any changes being done by Washington DC. So that means, in all likelihood, and I can talk about this in a minute, but in all likelihood, the legislature and the governor will come back to Albany to try and figure out how to make this budget work.
Right, we do have a note there at the bottom of this slide here saying they may be back in emergency session sometime in the fall to address any of these federal budget actions. So the policies of the governor and the legislature were largely centered around these areas in schools. The governor wanted to set statewide distraction-free school policies with cell phones being banned at schools. So they achieved that as part of the school policy. Governor and legislature, of course, the governor's been talking about housing since she has been in office. Here she's providing homeowners more leverage by banning private equity purchases within the first 90 days a home hits the market, and making more investments in pro-housing communities and cities of yes.
Which is New York City's initiative.
Which is New York City's initiative. Thank you, Ryan. About, we estimate 20 to 30% of any county's housing stock could be owned by private equity or investment properties, at least 20%. Another priority of the governor, involuntary commitment policies changing here. And she was able to secure that passage and including an appropriation for assisted outpatient treatment programs. Some other policies, masks, a new misdemeanor for cracking down on individuals who use a mask to conceal their identity when committing a misdemeanor or a higher crime. Changes in the discovery laws and our criminal prosecution process. As Dave mentioned, the unemployment insurance debt was a priority of the governor and the legislature. And as Ryan mentioned here, some new powers given to the governor here, similar to powers given to Governor Cuomo during COVID. Governor Hochul will have some authority to propose cuts to the legislature, giving them a period of time. And if they don't act, these cuts become permanent. Anything to unpack in that, Ryan?
The only thing to add here is if revenue is off by $2 billion, regardless of the source of revenue, by the way, it could be state sales tax receipts, personal income tax receipts, corporate tax revenue, or of course, federal aid. If it's off by $2 billion in the enacted budget, the governor has the ability to go in and essentially propose making cuts. The legislature does have 10 days to respond to that. However, as we've seen in the past when Governor Cuomo had this authority, the legislature did not exercise that check and balance. So it will be interesting to see if this happens, what the legislature will do.
Okay, again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll pick them up as we go through today's session or pick it up at the end. Dave, the governor had some major tax proposals that she championed. Here we're showing our members 4 of them. You want to quickly walk through these rebates, child tax credits?
Yeah, these are pretty much as proposed by the governor. They went through as proposed. The only one that she came up short on was the inflation refund. Initially, she wanted to spend $3 billion or provide $3 billion in relief to homeowners and individuals up to $500 per. It was cut back to $2 billion. It was like with a maximum of $400. These other tax credits or tax cuts went through pretty much as proposed. And the next slide kind of shows the rate change, I believe. I'm not sure if it was in there. Here it is. It just kind of shows the taxable year. So I did get a question today about when new tax tables or withholding tables will come out. The tax rate change doesn't occur until next year. So later this year, the tax department will put out new withholding tables for state taxes for counties to follow, for your employees and for others to follow as well.
Okay. So the real meat of this budget, Ryan, something that, you know, we focused on very carefully here was in this particular slide. You want to walk through some of these numbers here and why these are important for the counties?
I think there's three numbers here to highlight of significance for counties. One being the $50 million new appropriation for the County Partnerships Program. And the governor and the state legislature reauthorized the funding from last year, but this is a new $50 million allocation. So the program is up to $100 million now. There's also a $50 million increase for CHIPS, and that's for all municipalities. And there's $45 million in new funding for aging services to meet the current wait list for aging programs. So those are the three big ones that I wanted to highlight.
Well, these were
New investments.
These were programs that were championed by NYSAC.
They were.
And we want to really thank our governor and the legislature for investing in county governments. And again, as Ryan mentioned, the County Partnership Program, thank you all for responding to that. We did have the vast majority of the New York counties put in for their $1 million grants. And as Ryan mentioned, we have another round. So you could begin preparations probably within the next 60 days.
Yeah.
And that program will be live and you can put in for the next round of another $1 million related to housing. If it's non-housing, it's $500,000 for a capital project. So again, great job, Ryan. Great job, Dave. Here we're talking again, Ryan mentioned that $45 million in new funding for aging services. We have been championing money for our AAA offices, Ryan, for many, many years. Great to see them finally investing in aging programs. It took the state a long time to listen to us.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we'll have to be a little cautious on how Washington, DC handles Title III funding in particular. Title III funding are your congregate meals, home delivered meals, and transportation aid that flows to the state of New York and then down to your county office of the aging. We'll keep an eye on that, but for now, the state is making an enormous investment in aging services. And to your point, Stephen, it's something we've worked very closely with our AAA directors on.
Yep, about time they invested in that. Okay, after aging, just a quick slide here on agriculture, $61 million for local agricultural assistance, a slight increase from last year, $20 million for non-point source solution, pollution control programs, farmland preservation, and other ag programs. You know, Ryan, if I had to put a bright light in this budget, it really is this one to me.
Yeah.
This one really, I think we hit a home run here in community college spending program here. Again, maintaining that funding floor for community colleges. This used to be a very difficult lift for us.
And it did. So for at least 4 years now, the state is committed to 100% funding of prior years. But the other neat thing here this year is this new program for free community college and high demand occupations. And the key here is, and it's in bold on the slide, it's 100% financed by the state of New York. No county fiscal costs.
At our request.
Yeah.
Again, if there are occupations that you might want to participate in this in a local regionalized area, you could let us know, send us an email, and we'll try to get that into the state's hands. But right now, they're addressing nursing, engineering, technology, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. Provides for grants for tuition, fees, books, and supplies for SUNY or CUNY students between the ages of 25 and 55 years old, pursuing an associate's degree, again, in those high demand fields. But to me, this was a big, big win, championed by our governor and our legislature and the SUNY Chancellor, John King. Economic development, again, another round of DRI programs, so $200 million, $100 million for DRI and $100 for New York Forward.
Yeah.
Ryan, we also had language introduced for communities that were impacted, like Washington County, who's devastated by a prison closure there. We now have a portion of that 200 million to address state facility closures.
Yeah.
So whether you're perhaps in Chemung or Sullivan or other areas of the state that had prior year juvenile justice facility closures or state prisons, this is now an eligible program for them to apply for.
That's right. So typically the DRI, right, is not, counties are not eligible for DRI grants. But now, this definition has been opened up. A lot of strong advocacy went into this to allow for communities impacted by, state juvenile justice or correctional facility closures. They're now, going to be able to access a portion of this funding.
Fantastic. And again, that was championed and advanced by the governor herself. So thank you very much to our governor for that particular program. Ryan, anything counties need to know about election
Just
funding?
one small piece on elections, it's a little tricky to read, but it's that last bullet. We are going to receive $1 million in new funding for operational costs with administering elections. The New York State Board of Elections will develop a formula. It'll be distributed to counties, very similar to how it was done 3 years ago, I believe, when we had received that initial $14 million allocation. This year we have $1 million. No new money for capital.
Two other changes I forgot to mention in the correctional field. One is hiring of correctional officers, lowering that age to 18 years old.
For state facilities.
For state facilities only. And also the ability for the governor to close an additional 3 state prisons has been included in this budget. If you have concerns on that, obviously you should be weighing in with your governor's regional representative and also our office.
Yeah, and she does have until March 31st of 2026 to make a decision on those facilities.
Thank you, Ryan. In the environment, clean water infrastructure, another round of $500 million, which we have been championing for years. The state making a massive continued investment in our clean water infrastructure and our Sustainable Futures program, another $1 billion for capital projects for climate mitigation. The one I'll circle here is $50 million for electric vehicle fast charging stations, $200 million for renewable energy projects, including municipal projects. Very important program is being advanced by the state here.
Shout out to DEC for including municipal projects.
And a shout out, as Ryan is mentioning, to the Department of Environmental Conservation for including municipal projects. Thank you, Ryan, for mentioning that. In gaming, continuation of prior policy, no real changes here. In commercial gaming, offset funding or VLT, host community aid, or commercial and tribal compacts. No real changes, status quo from last year's budget. Again, Ryan mentioned that county partnership program here. This is for projects that have a public benefit for housing, healthcare, or treatment facilities. Another round of $50 million is advanced for the counties. Affordable housing, here's the budget language talking about certain institutional investors from seeking to buy a single or a 2-family home. It prohibits institutional investors unless it's been on the market for 75 days. The budget also prohibits institutional investors from claiming interest and depreciation deductions for 1- and 2-family homes. Boy, Dave, the state sure looks like it's getting serious. Even in the tax code, it's addressing institutional investors.
Yeah, they're really trying to focus on single family ownership, not necessarily having to rent. So they're feeling this is one area where they can make some inroads.
We've done some research about 20%. Again, in particular, the area that we looked at was the Hudson Valley. About 20% of the housing stock is under institutional investment. Medicaid cap. Look, many of you that are watching this were not here when the state capped Medicaid. It capped it back in 20 years ago, quite a long time ago. But we continue to track this. Obviously, this is saving counties in New York City $8.3 billion. Very important program. And with everything that we've talked about, Dave, with Medicaid changes at the federal level, this Medicaid cap, very important state policy for counties.
Yeah, we're very vulnerable here depending on how the state responds to the federal Medicaid cuts. And we've had discussions at the executive level about this, and, you know, they're saying everything is on the table as far as managing what comes down from the federal government. So we're interpreting that they're gonna be looking to everybody to help out potentially.
Mhm. Very important program. This budget continues the Medicaid cap. Some public health and mental health changes here. Core public health funding to counties, $230 million, subject to Article 6. Was that even level funding? Again, very important to counties. Article 6, core public health funding. Budget provides universal free school lunches. $340 million set aside for a free school. This is really coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Ryan, building off of that. I see the state putting in place a new birth allowance for a baby, the baby benefit. Ryan, you want to explain what that one is?
This is just a program that the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance is going to administer. We have to wait and see until there's more information out there on this.
Okay, so if there's a birth of a new child, OTDA going to give a one-time benefit for the parents of that child. New requirements for opioid settling for all counties now have to report on their website publicly how they spent the opioid settlement funds. A new law, counties will have to post on their website how they spent their opioid settlement funds.
Steve, if I could jump in for a moment on the baby benefit. The federal tax bill is also being marked up this week, and they've instituted a similar proposal there. They're setting up special accounts at the federal level, and it's forward-looking, and it's a limited benefit for 4 years. I think it starts in 2026 and would end in 2030, but any baby born potentially would get $1,000 deposit from the federal government that would be set up on their behalf. And even if the family doesn't do it, it would give authority to the Treasury Secretary to actually establish the account in the new child's name. The family could back out if they wanted to, but it's interesting that people are looking at birth as, you know, it's not an easy thing, and it's often expensive. So both the federal government and the state seem to be stepping into this area to provide resources on a one-time basis.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dave. We are getting a couple of questions on the institutional investment side of housing. We will probably do a webinar on this over the next month or so, because I think you'll find it quite interesting. It was news to me that we had so much of our housing inventory being owned by institutional investors, especially in the Hudson Valley. So we've gotten some requests in here to share that data from the Lincoln Land Use Institute, and we will do that, but we'll also do a webinar to more properly discuss this issue, as it is very important in light of the new state budget language. So sure, we will get that information out to you. We do have data for the Hudson Valley counties, Westchester, Rockland, Ulster, Dutchess, Orange region of the state. Ryan, EMS was a gigantic, I won't call it a failure, but there was a lot of language that was inserted off of what should have been a relatively straightforward ask. The ask here really was to raise transportation reimbursement rates to match Medicare for our providers, and to simply provide a taxing district authority for counties to help municipalities in providing EMS. What happened here?
That would have been the ideal scenario, had those two issues been the main focus. However, you know, the governor had proposed some language that included completely overhauling the way that we manage, plan, and assess emergency medical services in every single county in the state of New York, including requirements to develop, maintain, and implement a countywide EMS plan. In addition, the state Senate had advanced the bill similar on those requirements, but one that would have mandated counties and other municipalities to provide EMS. So we had issues there because it was a mandate. And then the assembly actually never advanced any language on paper, whatsoever. So you have three legs of the stool, right? In Albany, that's how policy is made, especially during the budget process. And unfortunately, despite our best efforts to provide negotiated language to all the parties, they were not able to come to an agreement. So, there is nothing in this state budget on emergency medical services. There is no rate increase, there's nothing.
Is it done for the year?
No, nothing is ever done for the year in Albany until, the speaker and the majority leader have their speeches, and if they declare we're not coming back.
Okay, so we will revisit this issue of a taxing district. This is our priority.
That's right.
Giving the authority for a county to implement a taxing district for EMS. Right now, that's limited to a town. This would be a county-wide, doesn't have to be contingency. It could be a couple of towns, village, city, county.
We work very closely with the Association of Towns and NYCOM, the Conference of Mayors, to create flexibility for all of us, all the municipal partners, to figure out what might work best. I think I've heard from just about every single county in the state, and the one takeaway is the process is radically different in every single county. So you cannot pigeonhole and put a new demand on one county in a one-size-fits-all process.
It seems to me that, I mean, it's just take a 911 system.
Yeah.
That is a voluntary, it's not mandated by the state, but it's largely mandated by the public. And the counties have stepped up with some participation of the state of New York to fund this service. Why are they trying to mandate counties to become an ambulance provider?
It's a great question. When someone dials 911, to expect the fire department, the police department, or in this case, EMS, to show up to your door. And frankly, I would agree with you, Stephen. I think the public demands emergency medical services. You're having a heart attack. I hope the ambulance shows up.
Yeah, clearly more work to be done there in EMS. Towards the end of the session. Public safety funding here, just going to get through this here. We've got a few minutes left. $80 million for prosecution and defense expenses, $36 million for the GIVE anti-gun violence initiative, $20 million for pretrial services, raise the age. Dave, what's happening with raise the age funding? How come the state continues to appropriate so much money? Are counties drawing down on this? What's the story with raise the age funding?
There's been limited drawdown of these funds, for a variety of reasons that's occurring. Is we're not building out enough beds. Counties haven't been implementing, programs to address this population. And the $250 million just keeps getting appropriated in full each year. So we're up to almost $1 billion in reappropriated funding that's available to draw down. I don't know how much cash is behind that. If there's really $1 billion in cash sitting there, I doubt it. But the appropriation
But there is authority
there. So I don't know if Ryan has more to add in that area.
I would just say one concern that I have in this program, is the fact that many counties have submitted for raise the age reimbursement. And in those counties that have submitted and have exceeded the property tax cap, they have not been receiving funds from the state of New York. So there's a process, and in state law, it's section 54-M of state finance law. This is going to be an end of session priority for NYSAC. We're trying to repeal this provision of law that requires counties to submit a hardship waiver if they exceed the cap to receive raise the age reimbursement. There are some counties that are owed over $1.5 million in raise the age funds.
Yeah, definitely a priority of NYSAC at the end of session, and a ridiculous piece of policy that remains on the books.
Yes.
Transportation, real quickly here, as Ryan mentioned, a slight increase, 50 million, not slight, a substantial increase for our CHIPS aid. Pave our potholes at 100 million, Pave New York 150 million, Bridge New York 200 million, extreme winter recovery funding of 100 million, and touring routes 140 million. These are priorities of counties and towns that we have championed for many years. So a steady increase, very important for our transportation funding. Let's take a question that's come in here. Ryan, do you want to?
Yeah. So this individual is asking while it's stating that the state has not created the appropriate forms for the hardship waivers in tier one. That is absolutely correct. In fact,
Which policy?
oh, I'm sorry, this is on raise the age, Stephen. That is absolutely correct. And the state does not have, as we speak right now, anything on their website to allow a county to post for a hardship waiver.
Well, we should
asked-
write to them on this.
And we have, and we will continue to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for bringing that to our attention. And lastly, here we just called to your attention, Joseph P. Dwyer funds, $8 million. We continue to put an emphasis on this. There's a higher event credit extends the hire a veteran tax credit provided to taxpayers for hiring qualified vets for an additional 3 years. And I think that will conclude our presentation for today. Again, a 6-week delay in approving the state budget, a lot of attention on Washington, D.C. Dave, final thoughts, and then I'll go to Ryan for final thoughts, and then I'll ask Jason Garner if he's able to say a few things.
Yeah, this budget from the get-go was pretty, I keep saying it's a pretty vanilla budget for counties, that there wasn't deep cuts in there and there weren't deep adds, so, it was what it was, and the fact that it was late, it didn't matter as much to us this year, you know, not that the state budget doesn't matter, but
Right.
it didn't change much for counties this year.
All right, well, thank you for
There's no
all,
harm.
thank you for all your great work, Dave. Ryan?
Yeah, I think, you know, right now, because the state budget was delayed by 6 weeks, we are in a flurry of activity. The end of session, legislative session has been truncated and shortened. The Speaker of the Assembly does want to extend that. It's yet to be seen if that'll happen. And then we have, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate and the President trying to jockey and figure out what's going to be in a reconciliation package. All of this is going to have an impact on the state budget and what and if and when state legislators return to Albany to deal with outcomes from Washington and also other priorities that they may not be able to get to by mid-June. So
Okay,
there's still a lot to happen.
and Ryan, thank you for your great leadership and legislative direction during this budget cycle. Are we able to hear from Jason Garner now?
Hey, Steve.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure as always. I just wanted to thank you and your team for all the hard work that you've done throughout this pretty long budget process already. This year, the analysis that you turned around, it was a really quick turnaround. We've shared that with all of our department heads. It's been really helpful as we prepare for the impacts of the budget on, you know, our, as we get ready to do our budget for next year for 2026. And, you know, I think as you guys have all been saying throughout this meeting, all eyes on the federal government in terms of what they do with the budget. So it looks like you guys have, you're going to be working overtime this year on your analysis, because that's going to be a huge component potentially of what's going to be happening with counties this year as we look ahead to crafting our own budgets for 2026. But once again, we want to thank you for the work that you do, the advocacy that you do. You know, I talk to you a lot, and just know that, you know, over the past few months since the session started, you guys have been really active in advocating for counties. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, County Executive Garner from Broome County, President of the County Executives Association. I see Sean Groden. Are we able to unmute Sean Groden, Mark, for maybe some commentary? President of the County Administrators Association. We're very actively involved with county administrators. Sean, do you want to give a little commentary about how you saw things and perhaps what's on your mind?
Thank you, Steve. I guess I would just echo Dave's comments that, you know, there were some good things in the budget. I'm pretty ashamed of the legislature for taking 6 weeks. That's ridiculous. And I guess I'm disappointed on the ambulance issues to just not getting on the table. I think the oxygen was sucked out of the room because of Discovery and MTA. But I guess we got a budget and we'll go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean Groden. Okay, we've got a request to share the slide deck. We will circulate that to all of our attendees today and those that could not join it. This recording will be made available on our website at the end of the day today. We'll post it on our website. And again, I want to thank all of you for the great work that you do serving the people of New York State. This will conclude today's budget review. Thank you very much, and let's go New York Knicks.
Been what, 25 years?
25 years.
Holy cow.
They play tomorrow
They got
night.
in,
Yeah.
final.
Yeah. Well, no, I think just to get
Just
past
the Eastern Conference.
just the-
Final.